I'm wondering if this is
yeah.
Right. Okay, I think we're good. Hopefully this live stream actually works properly. All right. I'm sharing. You guys sharing.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay. You can see my screen, Dave? Okay. Those were slides from last time. So next month we've got Gavin Miller. He's another local dev here. He works at Cisco. He's going to be talking about security. It's actually going to be I think a really good talk. He gave a talk at the last Ruby meetup, I think, and it went over pretty well. He's going to be he's modifying it to cover stuff that's a little more JS specific. including some stuff he shared with me that's actually pretty unreal that most people don't really know about. So that'll be one that you definitely don't want to miss, especially if you're a professional dev, because I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. And so without further ado, I'll pass it on off to Dylan.
Yay. Hello. Hello. Oh.
You turned on?
Yeah.
Test, test. You can clip it on. It comes a little, I noticed it came a little.
Okay. So everybody can hear me okay? I can hear myself. Okay. So I'm Dylan, and I'm going to talk about high-performance JavaScript. I'm mainly going to be talking about isomorphic JavaScript, progressive enhancement, and universal JavaScript. Are any of these terms familiar to anybody here? Okay, a couple people. Okay, so basically they're just some new methodologies that are starting to gain a little bit of traction that kind of give you the best of server-side rendering and client-side rendering. Yeah, my name is Dylan Piercey. I work at a company called Tiller Digital, and basically there I'm a web developer. I also built a CMS, a completely isomorphic CMS. So that's kind of where this talk is coming from a little bit. On GitHub at Dylan Piercey and npm.js at Dylan Piercey. So I'm going to start with some definitions here, and the first one is isomorphic. These aren't JavaScript-specific definitions. These are just the ones that are available in Google, but hopefully at the end of the talk you'll have a better understanding of how they fit in with JavaScript. So yeah, the first one, isomorphic, having a similar structure or appearance, but being of different ancestry, which probably doesn't make sense to anybody. Hello. Hello. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so that probably doesn't make sense to anybody, but basically, in terms of JavaScript, what it means is that your code kind of, if you're running Node on the back end, it might look like it's doing the same thing in terms of code, but it's actually executing different things depending on whether or not you're in the browser or the server. And then there's universal, which is another term that's kind of thought of as synonymous with isomorphic in terms of the JavaScript world anyway. Sorry? Oh, okay. Yeah, which is just applicable everywhere or in all cases general. And then the last one is a web development term, which is just progressive enhancement, which is probably the biggest thing that you get out of programming in this way, which is it's basically just the core functionality of your website is built using like standard web technologies, and you're not kind of expecting anything out of the browser. So it's kind of using forms and inputs, links, and everything kind of basically just pretending that you don't have JavaScript to work with. And then once you have the core built, kind of extending on that functionality with JavaScript. So for example, like if you need drag and drop, how can you make that work without drag and drop? So you might need to add arrows or something like that. But yeah, so it's just the idea of making the core of your site work for everybody regardless of what environment they're running in. So what do these things mean for JavaScript? Well, yeah, like I said, it just means running the code on the browser and the server at the same time. So typically it means using Node.js. You don't have to use Node.js. You can also use, I mean, you need a VM, like a JavaScript VM, but you can get JavaScript VMs for PHP, or I think there's one for Go as well. But basically it's just kind of putting your rendering and routing and stuff like that in both places so that your server can send out HTML and your browser can update that HTML. But everybody gets a good experience whether or not they're using client-side stuff or server-side stuff. And ideally with that, you're going to want to use the same APIs. How many people are using Node? I'm just curious. Okay, so a good chunk of people. Well, when you first pick up Node, you're thinking it's JavaScript. Like, that's awesome. I can use the same code in the front end and the back end, but really that doesn't happen in a lot of cases. There's a lot of Node-specific APIs that you have to work with. Callbacks are a lot more prevalent in Node. I mean, I know you use them for events, but definitely not as nested as they can get in Node. And I mean, you're also doing a lot of different things, so it kind of makes sense that the APIs are a bit different. But it's a little bit of a stretch to say that you can just go from working in the browser straight to working in the server and have the experience be exactly the same. So ideally with isomorphic JavaScript, we would kind of merge the two experiences where if I'm on the browser and I need to do an AJAX request, it looks the same as on the server, right? If I need to call some third-party API or something like that. And then, yeah, like I was saying, you kind of just want to be able to switch easily between environments. I don't want to be hung up on whether or not I'm bouncing back between the server and the browser. I kind of just want to, work on the view that I'm rendering. I want to take whatever I have in my API and render it as HTML or document. Do you have a question? Oh, okay, sorry. So before I kind of get into how to do any of this stuff, or because I don't know if some people have heard of the term, I'm going to talk about what the benefits are of server-side rendering versus client-side rendering. So yeah, rendering HTML on the server or updating the DOM in the browser. So I'm going to start with the client side, which a lot of us are kind of gravitating to nowadays. Mostly SPAs. A lot of people are familiar with SPAs. And what it usually means is, you have your HTML with one line in it that says, well, a few lines in it, but one line that says, get my app.js and render the whole page. But the benefit of this is that you don't have to refresh the page. You can just, do AJAX calls. If someone interacts with the page, they don't have any idea that you're having to navigate somewhere or anything like that. Everything's just kind of seamless. Whereas when you're doing server-side rendering, you have to completely refresh, re-render, and everything every time you make a change to the UI. Because with the server side, it's just a static page, basically. And then the other thing is you get quicker reaction times. So a good example of this is, say you have like a counter or something, or you need to increment how many products you have in a cart. If you're doing that on the client side, you can represent that immediately. Like they can click the button, you can update your view, you can update the DOM, and it's going to be immediate to the user. But if you're doing this on the server side, you have to basically click a link, send that to the server, get the server to render the entire page again, parse the entire HTML, and then show the user the results. So it takes a lot longer, and it's a little bit jarring for the user, which is another reason why we pick client side. And with the client side, you also just get access to tons of tools. Like I mentioned, you have access to drag and drop, which you can't do drag and drop in the server. You have like geolocation. You can access device-specific information like batteries and whatnot. There's tons of APIs in the browser, and they're pretty handy, and you can't actually do some of these things on the server. So that's pretty appealing. And then you also get all the fancy animations, which, I mean, you need to transition things. Sometimes you can't just completely refresh the page every time, or the user is going to feel like they're jumping around all over the place. But there are some advantages of client or server-side rendering, that a lot of people kind of miss, but it does lead to poorer user experience. So the first benefit that you get with server-side rendering is that the page speed is it seems like it's faster, because it's a lot faster for the browser to kind of get an HTML document that's formatted with all the content in there, parse that HTML and display it to the user, versus get an HTML document, find the script tag, download the script, parse the JavaScript, create some DOM, inject the DOM into the view. It's a little bit more work. And the bigger your JavaScript gets, the more of a problem this is going to be too. So nowadays we're using stuff like Angular and Lodash or whatever library, and our JavaScript file is getting pretty large. And when the user has to wait for the entire file just to see, the 10 lines of content that they're going to see on your homepage, it kind of leads to a poor user experience, especially if they have, poor connectivity or low bandwidth or something like that. And with server-side rendering, you also get better browser compatibility. I mean, how is the JavaScript going to break if there's no JavaScript to run? So this is, a lot of people kind of overlook this and think like, how many people have JavaScript turned off? Okay, 1%, I don't care about those people. But the reality is that there's like 7% of sites that don't get JavaScript ran. Now that's a lot bigger number than the 1% that have JavaScript disabled. And you might think, okay, that's a little weird. But really, that happens when either your JavaScript fails because it's in an environment that supports some code that you're using, or the connection's bad and the JavaScript file just doesn't load. And what happens when this does happen is that the screen is just white. I mean, if you're doing a spa and everything's rendered, you don't see anything. So the user, just thinks your site doesn't work. So when you're rendering on the server, at least the browser can pick up as much as it can and kind of give the user a good experience no matter what. Because your toaster supports rendering HTML. So, and with server side, I mean, this is probably the biggest pro that people try and sell isomorphic JavaScript to their business as, which is that it improves SEO because you're just sending out HTML. Google can parse the HTML pretty easily. It can go through and find your meta tags and stuff like that. But when a crawler sees your page and all it has is a script tag in it, it's not going to find a lot of information. Google can now parse some JavaScript, but it's a little finicky still. And I mean, it's finicky, and it's not going to work in Bing or Yahoo or any other search engine that you care about. So this might not always be a problem, but it still makes things a little easier for your clients in terms of SEO. And my favorite thing about server-side rendering is that it's easier, at least to me. You don't have to think about how am I going to update the DOM? How did I get to this point in the DOM? The DOM is just terrible in my opinion. So at least on the server, all you're doing is rendering some HTML. You're just generating a string more or less, and you have as much time as you want to do it. I mean, your clients might not be happy if you take a long time, but you can do whatever you need, call your APIs and all this stuff in order to render the page. So it's a little simpler. You have a URL, and you make a page based off of that URL and maybe some session data or something like that, which is a lot easier than thinking about, how am I going to react to this button click? Did they already click this button over here? Is my view changed? How did I get from A to B? It's a lot easier with server-side rendering. So I started to ask myself, why can't I have both? I want to render on the server sometimes, and I want to render on the browser, which is this whole isomorphic thing. And that's possible thanks to a lot of new technologies that are coming out and becoming more popular. Node being obviously the easiest way to do it, but like I said, you can do it with other technologies. And then there's some others here, like Browserify, which is just a how many of you use Browserify or Webpack? So a huge chunk of you. So they're just module builders. Basically, they let you structure your JavaScript so that it doesn't have to be some huge file, or so that you're not having to concat it. It just lets you kind of brings import syntax to JavaScript and compiles it into a way that the browser can understand it, which is pretty handy for huge applications. We're not writing little scripts anymore. We're writing entire apps in the browser. So it's nice to separate out our files a little bit more easily. And then obviously I have here React. This talk isn't specific to React, but React is going to be what I'm using right now to facilitate rendering on both the client and the server. With Angular 2, you can also render on the client and server, and there's a bunch of other libraries that can render on the server. Angular 1 can't, which is one of the reasons I switched from it. But React is really handy for this because React lets you generate what's called a virtual DOM, which can be represented as JavaScript objects instead of as HTML. So since it's just JavaScript objects, you can convert those JavaScript objects to HTML pretty easily. You can also look at your existing DOM and update it using these objects pretty easily. So React's pretty handy that way. And then the last one I have there is just NPM. A lot of you might be familiar with like Bower or other package managers. But NPM nowadays, well, obviously it's really good for Node, and that's kind of what it was originally made for. But it also works really great for the client now. They have flattened trees and stuff like that that came out with NPM 3. So it's just a really good tool to kind of host isomorphic JavaScript. It's obviously going to work in Node, and we have these tools that can make it work in the browser. Okay, so this is where everyone starts with isomorphic JavaScript. You kind of start with your utilities because utilities are environment agnostic no matter what. Think about it. I mean, if you're doing 1+1 in JavaScript, doesn't matter where you're doing it as long as it's JavaScript. So a lot of utility libraries such as Lodash or Lodash or underscore. Oh, how much time? Okay, cool. Such as Lodash or underscore, they just work in Node or the browser because there's nothing that's like specific to either environment. So typically when you're sharing code, you'll try and abstract out all the things that aren't environment specific, and then you get to use some of it in both places. So like here, it's just summing squares, super useless. But if you had a utility that was like mapping out emails or something, and you needed to do that in the browser or the client, you might be able to abstract this out and share it in both places, which is kind of handy. But a completely different approach, which I consider a little bit more isomorphic, changing in the background instead of just working everywhere, is AJAX requests, which is a little different in how it works isomorphically. So I have two example libraries here, one called isomorphic fetch. I don't know if any of you have heard of the fetch standard, but it's basically going to replace XHR. It's just a little bit cleaner, works with promises, and it's a lot easier to work with. And then I have super agent down below, which is just another popular REST-based AJAX library. And what's unique about the way that these work isomorphically is that they don't just work in each environment, because in Node you have to use the HTTP module in order to send out HTTP requests. In the browser you have to work with XML HTTP requests. So it has to work differently fundamentally. Like you can't really share code. But what's cool about these libraries is they know if you're compiling to the browser or if you're in Node, and they basically give you a shim that's going to work in either environment. So basically what happens is when you compile this, it's going to, for the browser code, it's going to compile out the XHR version of super agent, and in Node, it's just going to give you the Node version. So you get the same API that is just going to work in both places, which is kind of cool. And there's a lot of libraries like this too. So then, obviously, the biggest thing that was stopping isomorphic JavaScript, I think, is that it's really hard to kind of represent HTML isomorphically. I mean, it's just a structure, and if you're constantly diffing HTML in the browser, it's going to have terrible performance. But React kind of found a way to, like I said, represent HTML as objects. So this is JSX. I don't know if any of you have kind of seen it before, but what's cool about it is it lets you kind of embed arbitrary JavaScript expressions into your HTML and build complex templates and stuff like that, all within JavaScript. And since it's in JavaScript and it creates JavaScript objects, like I said, it can create HTML or it can create DOM. So you see here at the bottom I have rendering React on the server, which is just render to string, and rendering on the browser, which is just render. So that's pretty cool. I mean, we can make all of the HTML for our page and render it out wherever we are. Like we can send a full version of our page to the client and then just bootstrap over it when we're in the browser. So React lets us do that. And like I said, there's some other libraries that let us do it. React is probably just the most popular. So yeah, you even get routing with React. The syntax is a little weird here. This is React router, but it's nested. It's kind of easy to read. It's a little bit weird that it's HTML or JSX or whatever, but I mean, the fact that this code right here, minus the document body at the end, can run on the client or the server, and most of your application's routing can run in both places. That's that's a must as well, because you can't just render the home page on the server and then every other page is just rendered with JavaScript because that would defeat the purpose of isomorphic JavaScript. And then sometimes there are just situations where you have so much code that is going to work in both places, like 90% of your code. I often have this problem. And then there's just a little bit that needs to run only in the server, or a little bit that only needs to run in the browser. So with Browserify and Webpack, there are some transforms. One is called isBrowser, and it basically lets you do this, which probably is similar to, it's a lot less invasive than Meteor. So you can basically say if process.browser, browser code, else node code. And what's cool about it is when it compiles your browser code, it's actually going to strip out the node code. Like, it's going to statically evaluate all of those if statements and ands and whatever, and completely get rid of all the node code, which is exactly what you want because you don't want to send your server out to the browser. So it's nice to do little quick fixes, on the fly with this kind of thing as well. So looking at how, I don't know if you guys can see this, it might be a little too white, but basically this is kind of how an app or a regular MVC spa type app kind of works today. You have your server on the left there, it can be in whatever language, and you're doing a little bit of work on your server, and maybe a little bit of work, or maybe you're just rendering some HTML. Okay. And then the client has a bunch of JavaScript in it. JavaScript renders your app. But you don't have, the ability to necessarily call your API the same way on your server-side code, or at least it would get gross because you're doing it twice. So a lot of people have kind of started to move to this, which is what a current isomorphic project looks like, where you share kind of as much of your client-side JavaScript and server-side JavaScript as you can. They're both contacting the same API. They're both able to render your site, and your JavaScript is a little bit enhanced with things like I said, drag and drop. But yeah, this is kind of what people have started to go to. Facebook, well, Yahoo is doing a lot of isomorphic rendering, which makes a lot of sense because, they like to support old browsers, and this is a quick and easy way to do it if you don't have to worry about all the JavaScript dependencies that you got going on. But that's not very good. You have all these special cases, like I don't want my database in the browser. Like, that doesn't make sense, and that's kind of what Meteor tries to do. And there's lots of things that, this is the goal, but you don't achieve it. There's not sort of enough abstractions to facilitate making an app this way without, writing twice the code, and that's kind of what you're trying to avoid. So obviously our goal is this. You just have JavaScript. You don't have server client. You try not to think about server client, and your JavaScript renders your app, and your app calls your API. Like, that's kind of what I think the goal is with isomorphic JavaScript. So about a year ago, I was thinking, okay, how can I do this? What abstractions are missing? Like, I have I have like Ajax requests, and I have my utilities. I have React. What's kind of missing? Well, you need lots of things to make an app. You need sessions. You need like cookies, and your to work with your user, and a clean way to work with your API. And you need structure, which React doesn't really provide. You have access to things like Redux or Flux or whatever you're going to use to structure your React app, and that works pretty well in the client side. But as soon as you start to abstract that to the server side as well, it gets a lot bulkier, and again, you're writing twice the code. So I kind of looked at this and was like, time to make a framework. And yeah, because we build at Tiller Digital a lot of websites, and we wanted this. Like, we wanted to have SEO, and we wanted to have our pages, be perceived as fast and have a little bit of edge. So we kind of invested some time into exploring isomorphic JavaScript, and we came up with a framework called Rill. And basically, what it is it's just sort of a base for all isomorphic things to kind of bootstrap off of. And it's, as much as it can be, works 100% in the browser and the server. So what does it provide? Like, what are the new abstractions that Rill lets you do in both places that just kind of work? So, like I said, it's a pluggable base. It actually uses the middleware approach. Are any of you familiar with Express? Yeah, so a lot of you. Um, and I think middleware is awesome. Like, I just want to plug in my middleware. If I need to worry about authentication, I'm just going to throw in my authentication middleware. I don't want to think about plugging it into 30 different places in my front-end logic or whatever. The middleware approach just seems to work really well for stuff like that you're just kind of, you need everywhere. And it's easy to take out and test and stuff like that. So that was kind of thought of when we were making this. And yeah, so middleware pattern in the browser and server. And it gives you all these things. RIL gives you cookies, sessions, navigations, forms, routing, redirects, rendering, authentication, refreshes, and state. It lets you handle all these things isomorphically, and then with like the whole if process.browser, you can kind of escape it if you need. So what does it look like? Basically, this is what RIL does. It's a pretty simple idea, but RIL, once it's loaded in the browser, it's just going to listen for all of your link clicks. And then if you can handle that in the browser, RIL is going to handle it, and then it's going to put it through your middleware, which is also in the browser. But if you can't handle it in the browser, like the JavaScript hasn't loaded or something like that, it's going to send it straight to the server, and the server is going to be able to handle it. Same with forms. It can also parse forms in the browser and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool because, you get the whole benefit of code that's going to work in both places and thinking about things in terms of links and forms and stuff that you're kind of used to. But you have the benefit of it being super fast if it needs to be through the browser without having to call the server all the time. So this is kind of what it looks like. I mean, it looks like Express to me a little bit. You have your app, which is just RIL. I'm using React rendering in this case, which is just a middleware. And you can see here I'm rendering a little React app down there. And I'm just throwing that in the body, and that's going to get rendered. And if that's in the server, it's going to send out some HTML. If it's in the browser, it's going to update the DOM. So it's pretty simple. You get routing and the listen there at the bottom. You might think, oh, port 80, IP 0000. That doesn't make sense in the browser, but all that happens is RIL ignores that in the browser. It just starts the event listeners. So as much as possible, all of the middleware are designed so that if you can make it work in both places by just not doing anything, let's do it. Let's just make the code work in both places. So here is some, like I said, the features. So you have your app, and you kind of get a request object that has all the state for your app. And the state comes from a link click or something like that with sessions and stuff attached to it. You can access easily your host and path method, blah, blah, headers, set cookies, redirects, refreshes. All this stuff just kind of works in the browser or server, and it's with the exact same API. So in the browser, I'm going to get this. In the server, I'm going to get this. I don't really have to care. So this kind of idea has allowed us to build a ton of middleware that can take advantage of this, similar API and get, the functionality for a lot of simple things to work in both places. Like, think for instance, a logger. You need a logger in the browser, or you want one that can, kind of monitor performance and see what you're rendering and all that kind of stuff. But you also want one on the server. So RIL kind of facilitates that kind of thing where anything that can be shared should be shared and will be shared. So this means that you get to just program as if you don't have JavaScript, at least in the browser. You basically just get to pretend that you're working on the server and you're working with links and you're working with forms and stuff that you're used to. And RIL's just going to try and make it work exactly like the browser would have handled it, except you're actually rendering it in the browser, if that makes sense. You also get routing and middleware that you're kind of used to if you use a lot of Node, like Express, Happy, or Koa, which I love. The React router to me was just a little bit not necessarily confusing, but it's like the redirects are like, where are those? And I'm jumping around my app, and I have to look through all my application structure to kind of see how the data flows. Whereas when you're working with something like Express, you have it all top level. You can see, all of my routes are defined at the top. All of my redirects are kind of in those routes, and everything just kind of reads a little bit easier. And you get all the benefits of server and client-side rendering. So now that I have 3 minutes left, I am going to kind of show you guys what this works like. So just give me a second here. Yeah, sure.
All right. I'm going to be Van, a mic holder.
Okay. I think I'll talk. Okay, yeah. Just 1 second. So I'm actually just going to delete all this code and kind of go through it with you guys. Yeah. Okay, so can you guys kind of see this here? I'm just going to get, oh. Oops. Okay, so this is just a really simple app. You can see I have a route attached at the root here. This is going to be a simple to-do app, and I'm going to make it in like 2 seconds. So basically it's saying the to-dos, locals is just a way to provide stuff to the React views, and it's going to get the to-dos from the session, which is another middleware that is provided by Rill, which is pretty cool. It lets you have a session that works in the browser but also works in the server. And basically anything that happens in the session on the server gets put down to the browser, so you don't have to do extra requests and stuff like that. So everything's just, you know, happens. So the initial render is as smooth as possible. So here's kind of the app, and the way that you would build a to-do with Rill is the exact same way that you would build a to-do if you just had like PHP or just Node and you didn't have to care about the browser. So here you can see I kind of have a form that calls add to-do, which I can kind of just make here. So whoops, this is going to be post request, add to-do. Okay, so it's going to post, and you can see here it has an input that it's going to post to. The input's name is text, and I'm going to add that to a list. I'm going to render that list or something like that. Very simple. So I'm going to handle a post request in the browser. So how would I kind of handle that in the server? Well, I would expect to have a body of some kind. So what I'm going to do is locals to-do. Whoops. Just 1 second. I'm going to pull the to-dos out of my session, actually. It's probably a better way to start. And then I'm just going to push. Whoops. Oh, this is. I'm going to push onto my to-dos that body that I got. So rec.body.text is the input. You can also access files with Rill, which is pretty cool. But anyways, I'm going to pull this off the body, and then I'm just going to do, you know, a redirect, and I'm going to redirect back because, you know, the route's done. And then I will just render that down here. So I'm just going to use a regular map. To-dos. I'll be 2 seconds. It's all right. Maybe I should have left some of it up. So I'm just going to render a bunch of LIs in here. Can I scroll down? Yeah, at the bottom here, this is just a React-specific thing called. Oh, should I zoom in? Oh, I see.
Just crane your neck. You're just going to have to eke over.
Okay. So I'm going to render this little to-do here.
The beauty of this is that providing the stream actually works out, this stuff will be back online too, so you can review it. I find for me, at least for me, especially doing the organizing and making sure things are working, I can't pay that much attention to what's going on, so I have to go back and watch the live stream, and it's really helpful.
Okay, so I quickly threw this together. Hopefully I don't have a syntax error, but it doesn't look like it. So I'll just quickly show kind of what the Rill setup looks like. I'm just using a bunch of middleware here. Like I have a static middleware, which you guys have probably seen before, but it's just going to serve out the bin file. In the browser, this just does nothing, so I can leave it in here, and it's just going to work. I have my logger. I have some stat thing, a progress bar. And some of these work only in the server, some of these work only in the browser. So it's kind of just a place where you can attach middleware that's going to work in whatever place, maybe both places, like the logger. So anyways, now just going to add session to-dos. Yep. Nothing works when you do it live. So let's just actually, I'm going to show you guys kind of what it looks like to log a request in the browser, because you guys have probably never seen a node-style request logged in the browser. So we'll bring up my, this is probably really small, but okay, so there's the syntax error, sessions not defined. You can, is that readable down there? Probably not. Okay. Can I do that in here? No, not for the console. Okay, well, I can fix this anyways. Okay. Sorry. This all happens so quick when you're, doing it and you're focused, but when you're doing a presentation, it takes a little bit longer. Okay. So I had to update the to-dos. And there's a syntax error. No. Just threw on an extra parenthesis. Oh boy. Why is it not rendering? So.
Live coding at its best. Dave and I have been there many times. Yeah.
Yeah, that would probably be good. I'll just have it coded.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna take a quick break, bathroom break, and then Dylan's gonna be able to show this stuff after, so that we can keep things moving. And Dave's gonna hop on right after. So I missed an important announcement at the beginning. Washrooms are just down there if you haven't been here before. So ladies' washrooms are right here, which is very nice for you. Men's washrooms are down that way. There's one up here, and then the rest are down the stairs. So you have to go all the way to the end and down the stairs. If you're lucky, you might get that one. So we're going to take like a 10, 15-minute break. You can go to the washroom, grab another drink, whatever you want to do. And then Dave's going to kick back up, and then I think we'll, if Dylan has his debugging fixed by the break, he'll do a quick demo before Dave. Otherwise, we'll maybe just do it right at the end. But I think, I mean, generally, you guys got the idea of how this stuff fits together, and he fixed it already. So.
Yeah, I forgot to return in my map, so there was nothing in there. So anyways, you can see I can add things here. I could add an X button, but I'm not gonna do that right now. And there's lots of cool stuff that you can do. You can see there's well, you can't really see that well, but there's a progress bar at the top, which is just put in through a real middleware. You can see that it happens like instantly, and there's no sort of AJAX requests going on. It's just doing it kind of locally. But what's cool is if I just turn off JavaScript and rely completely on the server is going to handle this the exact same way. Obviously, it's re-rendering the page every time, but it just works. And that's kind of the beauty of it. So if I one thing that I want to just mention quickly is the progressive enhancement part of this, because a typical thing that you would have is as you type something in a search, it would be filtering automatically. Like clients want that all the time. They think that's awesome. But you can't really do that in a static web page. So what I typically do is try and think about how I can build that out, using existing web technologies, and then kind of add to that. So what I would do is just add a form that had a search, and use that, set all that up, and then with React, I would just go in there and say, once it's mounted, every time that this input's clicked, I'm going to submit that form, and then that's just going to work the exact same way. So if someone doesn't have JavaScript or the JavaScript fails for whatever reason, it's going to work on the server side. If not, you get the enhanced experience in the browser side. Like I said, you get loading bars and stuff like that, or whatever kind of fancy thing. The biggest thing we've done is drag and drop, which was kind of a pain, but essentially we just made it so that there's up and down arrows on a lot of our elements. And then once you do a drop, with the drag and drop API, it basically just submits the same form that would have been submitted by clicking on the up or down arrow. So you can do a lot of surprising things if you program this way, and it usually makes your application code a lot simpler, surprisingly, and also more robust, because if something fails, at least you have a fallback of the server. So that's kind of it.
Sweet. Nice job, Dylan. I take that back, actually. That last bit kind of made the whole presentation come together, so I'm glad he got that fixed. Like I said, quick bathroom break. We'll be back in 10, and Dave's going to carry us forward. All right. Okay, everybody. We're going to get our second session started, and then we can just talk and drink and whatever till they kick us out. And I'm feeling a little bit more energized because I got something to eat. I got a couple of beers. Feeling good. All right, so Dave's going to kick us off. He, like I said, he works at Bitovi. He's going to talk about some of the stuff they're doing over there. They did, if you guys had seen previous meetups or anything before, they had CanJS, and now you guys moved it. You rebranded it to DoneJS, right? Not really? It's like a super package. Okay, I'm going to botch it. So Dave's going to talk about it. We're going to give him 30 minutes to go, and then open season after that. Okay, take it away.
All right, I think I fixed the mic, but I don't know if that's true. Damn it. Liar. Okay, the mic. Eric.
Oh, that's not true. Okay, if I'm going to stand here and hold your mic, I'm going to grab a beer. One sec. Okay. All right.
I'm not here for 5 months and everything goes to shit. No, it's not true. I'm glad.
Like I said, the beer's better here.
No, but it's good to be back. I'm actually just in for today, 24 hours. I also brought my friend, I think, if he wants to listen. Hey, buddy, we're back home. Who has met my buddy in July? Okay, for the people that don't know you yet, do you want to tell us something about yourself? Awesome, thank you. It's grown up a little bit since last time where it totally blew up on us, but it was still fun, I think. So you can check that out online. That's actually not what I'm here to talk about today. I actually have a presentation to do. Yeah. Let's see. Did you open my browser for me? Yes. Okay. I'm actually here today to talk about DoneJS. That's why I got a free flight to Calgary, which is awesome. It's the very first time that I talk to you guys and actually get paid for it. So I guess a lot of people didn't know that even before I left that I work for a JavaScript consulting company called Bitovi. and I have the privilege of working full-time on open source. And the thing that I'm going to talk about today is what we worked on for pretty much the last year and a bit. So actually, let me quickly, whoop, that was too fast. Talk about what it actually is. It's a JavaScript framework. Yay, another one. Huh? In fact, this is actually the first one. Has anybody ever heard of JavaScriptMVC? I always ask them, people say, I don't know what MVC is. It's like, no, there was a framework called JavaScriptMVC. Came out about 9 years ago. It was the first client-side one. People told us we were crazy of building apps in the browser. It was really fun. And it's actually still around. Now it's called DoneJS. So that's where it actually came from. And there's a whole bunch of major features that I want to that it has, because it's kind of a full stack, one-stop solution, different than, mini small libraries like React. It tries to give you the whole package. I'm going to talk about that a little more if I have time, but I don't have that much time, I don't think. I'm going to talk a little bit about server-side rendering, not as much because Dylan actually talked a lot about it already. I want to show how it does NPM packages and hot module swapping, because I think it makes a cool demo. And how to use ES6, because that's what you should be using. Anybody know? Everybody knows what ES6 is and uses ES6. If you don't use it, it's pretty good, even if you haven't done JavaScript for a long time. And I apologize if I'm going too fast. Yesterday at Vancouver, I had a colleague, and we did the talk together, and she always was like patting my back when I was going too fast. I don't have that person here, but I also don't have that much time. I want to talk about real time, and some of you may know why, and how you can build the same app that I'm going to show that I'm probably going to build in iOS and Android and to the desktop. Let's see if we can get all of that done in half an hour, 25 minutes. Like I said, this stuff has been around for a long time, since 2007. It is the only JavaScript framework that I know that's still alive after that long of a time. And yesterday we talked about how that it's hard to go with the time, and it's actually quite hard to be old and cool, but it is possible, even though not everybody talks about it. For example, CanJS. It's a client-side MVC framework that has been around for a while too. I don't think there's a lot talked about it right now. But if you can find out if a website is using CanJS if you look at the console and you get a warning. Actually, no, only they're getting a warning, but you can't type can. So the Apple Store is using it, HP is using it. There's a lot of big companies that are using it because they actually like the idea of having something that's around for longer than 3 months. Hey, I'm actually... Okay, and that is too loud? Is it good? Am I yelling? This is part of what we use to create DoneJS. It has a bunch of other tools too. There is SteelJS, which is kind of like Webpack, except for that it actually optimizes your build. I know we're talking about high performance apps today, but I want to kind of more give a basic idea of what it does. So maybe I get a chance to talk about it. CanJS, we looked at it. FunkUnit, I've showed it before. It's lets you do functional tests like user typing and stuff like that. Test runner I made a while ago. Documentation engine, server-side rendering tool, which we talked about already, and a model layer, a real-time model layer. All right, you gotta hope my. Which one is mine? This is gonna be interesting.
Beer roulette. We're playing beer roulette up here.
You're doing interpretive dance while you hold my mic. Okay, so you can install it through npm. It works in Windows and Mac OS and Linux. You initialize a new app and it does a whole bunch of stuff for you. It creates basically the whole app. I've already done that because it takes forever. Let's make this bigger. You're welcome to ask questions. Also, if you can't read it, I'll make it bigger too. I'm going to say goodbye, Sam. You can check that out online. Maybe we'll have more time to talk about it. And in the chat app, I can just say start the development server. And a cool demo I kind of want to do is actually nobody tripped over the cables yet. I would guess that's just my job.
Yeah, not so far.
All right, let's look at something that I want to show first, which is actually makes for a good demo. Live reload. I'll make this smaller, go to localhost 8080, and I just see a boring hello world. A nice thing about it is that if I change my stuff, it updates. Whoa. Dangerous. We like to live on the edge. That's why I like live coding too. It updates your content right away. The nice thing about this is that I won't have to restart this entire server ever once, and it also does server-side rendering for you, which I'm going to show in a second. But the nice thing that I'm going to show first is how to use NPM modules, because I think that's pretty cool, and that's the way to actually use and share libraries. Remember the old times where you had to like go online, look for the thing, download the zip file, put a script tag in your thing, and then write all those things. When a new version came out, you had no idea. NPM solves all of that stuff for Node, and now it solves all of that stuff for the client as well, because Node and the client came pretty close together. So because I can't design anything, I'm going to install Bootstrap and do what every Bootstrap developer initially does, which is copy and paste from the docs. Now, the only difference that you can see here is that here we have this like custom element, HTML5 element, that actually imports your less, and it does a bunch of stuff like compile it and then run it for you. So that, and the rest is just some Bootstrap so that we see that it worked. Let's put this on the page in here. And there we have Bootstrap and the updated app. So I really like this workflow because it's super fast and you get all those modules that you already have online on NPM. Actually, I'm not going to talk about server-side rendering. What I'm going to talk about is that you get this whole thing rendered on the server. I think Dylan did a good job on like talking about why you want server-side rendering. CanJS does server-side rendering too with DoneJS, and that's the idea of the whole suite, right? If you have the individual tools, you have to kind of figure out how to put them together and then create your own framework on top of that. This always has been like, from our experience of 8 years of building big apps, the best practices and tools put together so that you can just get started and get stuff done. Here is Bootstrap. It inlines it in development mode. Like you see, this is the compiled CSS from the less. It actually links to your production CSS that it builds for you automatically in production mode. It also links to the CDN if you tell it to, which is what you want to do in production. But if you look down here, and I'm going to make this a little bigger, you see that all of this stuff comes out as rendered HTML already. There's a nice little thing called the inline cache, which actually I should talk about because DoneJS does. So there's this tricky thing with server-side rendering, right? When you make an AJAX request on the server has no idea that you're making an AJAX request, so it just gives you back the HTML page. So you have to like take care of yourself on how to like wait for all the stuff and put all the data together. And this does that for you automatically already, which is really nice. So you get back the rendered HTML page, including your data of all the requests you make, and it does that automatically in the newer version, which we're pretty proud of. Then it loads the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in the background, and then just replaces the page. And I know React can make the DOM live, but just replacing the entire page rendered was fast enough. We did a whole bunch of benchmarks. It was fast enough. The bottleneck was actually getting the data. So if you get the data already in the rendered page, you get a big performance gain. Like you see it, like technically finish a whole bunch sooner. Cool. I don't want to rush too much. 18 minutes, okay. I want to show how to build a chat app in 30 minutes because we've built, how many chat apps have we built so far? Next step, components. That was actually one of the biggest quotes earlier on, saying that you should build your apps in small reusable components. We said that in 2008, and then assemble them into bigger ones. React kind of take that too hard, and then it created Flux, where all your stuff is just at the top level. So there's a lot of interesting things going on right now in figuring out what the best way is. For CanJS, the components actually get their own data as well. So there is no top level state management thing. Each component has its own state. It's quite a different philosophy. So it's interesting to see how well the different approaches work in different environments.
Probably a little bit more like a little more similar to Relay, I guess, to an extent. Hey? I don't know if you're familiar with Relay, like Facebook's framework that does something kind of similar, where each component has the ability to query for its own state, but it's not quite as clean, I don't think.
I really like those different philosophies, because it's going to be interesting to see what works for different apps, right? I mean, what works for Facebook does not necessarily mean it works for you. So it's worth looking into other stuff. I'm just saying. Let's create a big component. This is actually what is kind of nice about our structuring, and this is not specific to any framework. Oops. I keep doing that all the time when I do live demos. This is really hard to see, probably. But there's a bunch of files in here. So this is a standalone component that has its own tests, its own demo page. So if one of your coworkers is like, I want to see what this thing does by itself, you just go to the demo page. It's always a pain to maintain, so we try to make them as small as possible. Like you see here, all you do is import the component and then use the custom element. It has documentation, it has a template, and it has a test file. So this is all very, very self-contained. We're starting to see some good ways of sharing functionality between client projects, because who has made their own tabs widget? More than 5 times, more than, right? So that happens quite frequently. I'm not going to show the tabs widget, because that's about as exciting as chat applications. But what I want to show is a different approach in routing. Let's quickly add this to the page. Actually, yes. A different approach in routing. Because you've seen with React, right? Somebody makes this route thing, and then you say, for this route, do that, blah, blah, blah. This approach is a little different and super confusing as hell until you get it. Just like JSX. If I find my app, you don't talk about routes until the end. We have this top level view model, which is an application state object that has the page title, the user that's logged in, all this stuff. And all this stuff in there, when it's done, you say, oh, I want to have this be showing up nicely in the URL. And then you just say, oh, well, map the page property. So you can just say page value home. Sorry, that good beer. You have this property on your view model, and then you just say map the page property to that URL. So on our server, we get things like home, chat, right? Something like that. And then that will just become a part of a property of our application state, which is actually quite powerful, because you don't think about, it's one of my pet peeves, because there's so much time wasted on URL routing, because it's something that is easy to understand and something that is a problem if you just want to get started. But what you really want to do is figure out, what does my application actually need? And then you can make it look pretty. So we've done that. And the last step, how we do routing on the actual main page, so this is using handlebars. If you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to go into the template stuff too much because I don't think it's as interesting as some of the other demos that I want to go into. So let's remove this thing. And then in our page, we can actually just say, hey, if the page property, because this index file gets the page, if it's chat, import the chat messages component and then render it. Otherwise, render the home page. Which is cool because this import happens asynchronous and it builds for you in production, doesn't make just one big lump of stuff. Like if you have an e-commerce page, you want to load the product data, the product page JavaScript only when somebody goes to a product page, right? So it figures this stuff out automatically by using those imports on your template. It's all very template driven. There's different philosophies right now too. Like I said, we've been doing it for a very long time, so we'll adapt to good ideas, I think, just as well even without having them. But that's the beauty of open source, right? So let's try this. Now it's getting warm. I was spoiled from Vancouver, right? So this page is not right. This is the home page. And then we go to the chat page. You see the URL updated and everything is beautiful. Cool. So that was a quick excursus in routing. The next interesting thing is data, because that's everybody knows Momentum. I don't know if Jason is here, but built in Calgary, and everybody keeps asking me if I don't say it. Momentum dashboard, you should check it out if I have yet. All right, let's go to the docs. There's a nice guide, so you can go over this at your own pace, because I know I'm going to be quite too fast. But what I wanted to do is generate a model. Models are, well, models, right? They connect to an API. Supermodel message, our endpoint is localhost. What's the default port for the generator? 3000 messages. Our ID property is ID. Now we created a model, and then we're going to throw that model on the page. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first? I'm going to connect to the remote URL. So if you go in here, you'll see we created the model. It just says, well, it's a connection that connects to that URL. This is the ID property because it's important. And then it creates an HTML5 tag for you where you can do data fetching in your template, which sounds really dirty. Okay, I'm actually going to just connect to chat DoneJS.com, which is the demo page. And there's an API server running on API messages. So there's a bunch of messages here so that we actually see something on our page. Zinga. Gesundheit. And then I'm copy and paste from the guide. Go to start chat, and there I see a whole, this is the VanJS people. Gabe is actually going to be here next month. He has some pretty cool projects. March? Okay. So you already see, let's quickly look at it. I said I'm not going to go too much into templates, but it's just getting the whole list from our API and then does some bootstrap magic. I also added the form down here to input a new message, which I'm going to do right now. So we have the form, and then we just gotta, this is way too small. Why doesn't anybody tell me? Add the functionality to the messages thing, replace this. You see down here, all we do is we create a new message model with the name and the body, which is those two form fields, right? And then I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to empty the body because you want to send a new message. So this is really nice for view models. You can test that really easily. So we had a lot of good experience with separating out your logic for the view from your actual templates and all this stuff. Cool. Let's see if it works. Did my chat just die? Did I make an error? Oh no, it's still there. All right, let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Damn it. Because this is all kerfluffled. Come on. It's kind of there, but not really super real time, right? And that's the thing that we kind of want to add. And some of you may actually know what's going to happen now. Am I going to show the generator? Okay, let's do it. So one thing that's important is that I need more beer. A smart mic stand. It's a startup idea. One thing that's important is that all of this stuff is actually backend agnostic, which means that you can use it with Rails, with any Java, whatever is cool in Java right now. I think Spring, because my Spring framework questions and answers on Stack Overflow still get upvoted. So you can use it with any backend framework. The good thing is that we actually made one, so I can't help it, right? Let's make an API. So I already showed the online API, but you know, it's so easy now, demos, that we can just create a new one. Chat API, yo feathers. Okay, project name, chat API, yes, description, a chat API. We want REST APIs in real time from every domain because we're lazy. What database? Eat that, Meteor, Mongo. We'll still use Mongo. No authentication because that's a pain to implement. Now we're going to install a bunch of stuff. So I'm using this great tool, which I always, when NPM takes long to install. This is local NPM, which is why I can be so daring to actually install locally on a presentation. This actually caches your NPM packages locally. So even if you're offline, you can still run NPM install. It's kind of cool. It's pretty fast too. And you can share it with your colleagues. So if you got all your colleagues are installing a lot of the same stuff, you just run this on a server in your office and you get all the stuff really fast. Now we have an API. We just need to create a messages service. And we're not going to go in too much depth there, but I just wanted to show off this awesome generator that guy made. And we want to call that service messages. Yes, I know. So I got to change a couple of small things, but it's going to be pretty easy. Now, what it generated? Well, I wanted to go into two things. So here we have our messages model. This is just some dummy data. You don't even need to worry about Mongoose or anything, but what we need for the API is we need and pardon me if this is too quick, but we need a name and a body property. And both have to be required. And then I have to do one thing here, which is turn off pagination. And because we want to see all messages. And then I'm just going to import this file, import messages from, this is ES6, it is cool. App.configure messages. It actually was supposed to do that automatically, but we didn't have enough time. Oh, one more thing. Default. I'm going to change this to chat API. So this is a MongoDB connection string, right? But if I say npm start now, do you know where it runs? 3030. Okay. And then go to localhost 3030 messages. I see an empty array. Actually, let me change this back to feathers because I think there's some messages on it already. So I'm going to restart the server. And there is a bunch of messages. So we just created our own messages API that does all the things for us and real time, which I think is pretty cool. There's a lot more we can talk about it. We have talked about it a lot already, but the new version, you want to talk about that for a minute? Okay, after. Fair enough. Because what I wanted to actually show is we can change our endpoint. And then we can just say, oh, well, we need real time, which is what this thing is doing. And just say, okay, npm install socket.io, because it sets socket messages here. Notice I have not restarted the server yet, because it does hot module swapping on the server too, so the server-side rendering updates. That was hard to do, actually. Some of those things. And then we're going to import it in our model. And we're going to add this thing down here. And all you do is create a new connection to our API, though, not to this one. So create a new connection to, oh, that didn't work. Create a new connection to a socket connection, and then listen to message created, updated, and removed event. And the cool thing that the middleware, the model layer here does, you can just tell the connection, hey, a new instance got created, something got updated, and something got deleted, and the middleware layer figures out all the things for you. Like if you're showing a list of to-dos on your page, like we're doing, right? Chats, sorry. I have done so many to-do apps. I'm talking about to-dos already. Let's reload this. So here's our test messages. So if somebody removes somebody else, it'll just automatically take it out of the list. If somebody creates a new one, it hopefully adds it to the list as well. So I'm going to quickly see if everything is the way I want it. And then I show you how this actually looks. So if you have two tabs open, everything blows up. Ooh, I'm getting a cross-origin request error. It didn't work because of browser restrictions. Yeah, I know. I did enable course, but it didn't work. That's sad, but I have a fallback. I'm just going to go back to our actual API, sadly. This is just a configuration issue, actually, but I don't want to go into that because I already think it's a lot to show. So let's go to back to our old setting. Reload that thing. Oops. Oh. It's a long day. Install didn't work. Today is a bad. Oh. My apologies. This is actually ID. If you look at the chat.done, the messages API, you'll see that this is not _ID, but it is actually ID. It can be that simple, but sometimes. There we go. Yeah, It worked with some hiccups, but today is a weird tech day. I think it hates us. All right. The last thing I want to show, because do I still have time? No, I do.
How long?
1 minute. So I don't know if you has anybody used PhoneGap or Electron or NW or right? So that's really useful, and it's really cool if you want to share an app across different platforms. There's React Native now, which works quite different, also quite smart. But I think for a lot of apps, a web app is also a good solution. And what you can do for iOS and Android, you just say DoneJS add Cordova, or you say DoneJS add NW, and it asks you a couple of questions. I'm going to go to a different folder because this takes forever to install. So I'm going to go in here and say, and then you can just say DoneJS build NW. And it takes a little, so this is the production build, and then it, then it creates a releasable NW executable. So if we say down here, open build 0664 DoneJS chat, you get the whole chat app in production as a desktop browser application. You can do the same thing with iOS. So you can do DoneJS build Cordova. So we did all this annoying like work for you already to figure out how to send this up, because it can be quite a bit of work. So you can say DoneJS build Cordova and then spit out an iOS app, but Xcode is a little slow, and I don't know what else to talk about. So I know I kind of rushed a little bit because I only had half an hour, and there's so much to building a whole JavaScript application. But we think that our stack does a good job in combining a lot of those things to get you going, to actually get stuff done. As exciting as it is to sometimes figure out all the best ways to put different things together, right? Sometimes it's also helpful to get to the product that you want to do instead of figuring out how to build to Android, which, by the way, I've never managed to install the SDK and get it working, but I luckily don't have to. So there's a couple of other demos I could do, but I think that's hopefully somewhat of a good overview on when you guys want to try it out. I'm more than willing to help. I also brought shirts, as many as fit in my carry-on. I'm only here for 24 hours, so there's some shirts over there. Quick side note, just for a minute. They sent them from the US, which is probably the most expensive way to get shirts printed and done. I paid $450 in customs. Well, they paid $450 in customs. And then they sent me way too, like I have a whole box full of XL and 2XL, and I have not given out a single 2XL shirt in Canada. I don't think so. They were actually really big. Yeah, that's why everybody says like, so I have a lot of shirts. Please take some. And that was it from me today. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Dave. That was a whirlwind tour. So I think we're gonna have to. Some people are gonna have to go back and watch that, including myself. Thanks everyone for coming out. Feel free to stick around for a while. Make sure you settle up with your server before you take off, and we'll be Terry's killing it. They're killing it. Round of applause for the ladies here. They've done a great job. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next month. Make sure you don't miss next month. If you're gonna go to any talk and you're a professional developer, go to next month's meetup. I will be there. You will learn some shit that might save your day job if you completely screw shit up and like get hacked. So show up. And yeah, thank you for coming out. We'll be sticking around for a while. See ya.